Welcome to the news on NTA International. I am Nolin Ebel Ame and my sign language interpreter is Taiwo Ozoma. The headlines. South Korea's Constitutional Court impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Supreme Court sacks Abure as LP National Chairman as Federal High Court adjourns Natasha versus Senate case. Four African commodity exchanges agrees to work towards easing trade. And here is the news. Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye says his country faces a tough financial future that would need sacrifices, just as South Africa urges World Trade Organization's reform after United States tariffs. Chikunonso Nwabueze reports.
C'est ému pour tous les jambards tombés au champ d'honneur.
Faye, who said this in his annual State of the Nation speech, emphasized that the state of public finances of the country, as revealed by the audit report, show that citizens must count first of all on themselves to redress the situation, adding that as a people, they are very capable and will succeed with the mobilization of everyone. He called for active solidarity to confront the numerous challenges facing the country, but said that budget discipline is not negotiable. Social tensions have risen in recent months, and the government's financial watchdog said in a report released in February that Senegal's debt was at more than 99% of its gross domestic product, higher than the figure given by the last government. It said the 2023 budget deficit was 12.3% of GDP, when the last government said it was 4.9%. The IMF said in March that there were significant errors in Senegal's public debt figures for 2019 to 2023 and called for corrective measures. In another development, South Africa on Friday asked for the reform and reinforcement of the World Trade Organization (WTO) after United States President Donald Trump imposed sweeping tariffs, saying all nations need to abide by the rules of global trade.
We are advocating for a reform of the World Trade Organization and ensuring that it's able to adapt to current reality, but also ensuring that we're able to reinforce a multilateral system of trade and transparency across the board.
Foreign Minister Ronald Lamola, on his part, said it will affect several sectors of the economy, including automotive industry and agriculture, with implications on jobs and growth.
Not only for South Africa, it's for all countries across the group. It's just different of varying degrees. And there is an understanding that the best response will be all of us working together, finding solutions together.
The United States represented 7.45% of South Africa's total exports in 2024, while South Africa accounted for only 0.4% of U.S. total imports. As such, South Africa does not constitute a threat to the United States, he stated. Chukunonso Nwabueze, NTA News.
Four African commodity exchanges have agreed to work towards easing trade in commodities among themselves. Malawi, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Zambia are the first members of the AFCFTA Association of Commodity Exchanges to enter into such an agreement, which was announced at the association's conference in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe.
Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe signed an historic MOU that will allow negotiations for cross-border trade in agricultural commodities.
The idea is that there are some commodities in some of those countries that others need, and vice versa. And so how can they already very quickly unblock barriers and initiate cross-border trade? Wheat is in abundance today here in Zimbabwe, but in most of the other African countries we can't access wheat, and we're importing from other parts of the world. So now we can tap into the Zimbabwean market as long as you have surplus.
According to the World Bank, Africa's food imports top $50 billion per year. The AFCFTA Association of Commodity Exchanges wants to slash that bill and is tipped to bolster the continent's food security and economic resilience.
They bring transparency when it comes to price discovery,
promote and enhance value addition and industrialization, and create better value for farmers, traders, and exporters. Trade between the exchanges will improve market access.
It aims to ensure that a subsistence farmer and a grandmother in the most remote parts of Zimbabwe can market not just in Zimbabwe, but as far as Egypt while having fair prices.
And empower rural farmers.
The kind of transparency they get, gives them or puts them in a position where they can bargain, where they know what the value of their commodity is and actually receive the value of their commodity.
Commodity exchanges can reap the rewards from building confidence across the various stakeholders.
The next thing, of course, is that the commodity exchange itself must be an efficient platform that ensures seamless marketing of the crops, timeous payments for farmers. And once that happens, it means it can attract financing. It can then begin to do futures.
The Association of Commodity Exchanges was established in 2022 and currently has 16 members.
China announced 34% tariffs on U.S. imports on Friday, the first major economy to fire back against President Donald Trump's swinging new levies in an escalating global trade war that sent markets deep into the red. Countries and companies alike weighed their options, and the EU readied for talks with U.S. officials. Potential responses could include retaliatory tariffs or other measures that could escalate a trade war that has raised fears of recession. China, one of the United States' top trading partners, was first, announcing that tariffs of 34% on all American imports would come into effect from April 10, and saying it would file a suit at the World Trade Organization (WTO) over the tariffs. It also said it would impose export controls on a number of rare earth elements used in medical technology and consumer electronics. Trump announced 10% import duties on all nations due to kick in on Saturday, and far higher levies on imports from dozens of specific countries taking effect next week. Countries have slammed the tariffs, but with the exception of China, have so far withheld retaliatory measures, offering talks with the United States. EU Trade Chief Makros Sefcovic is due to speak with U.S. counterparts on Friday after Trump hit the 27-nation bloc with a 20% tariff. In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump unveils the first gold card, a residency permit sold for $5 million each, aboard Air Force One on Thursday. Trump previously said that sales of the new visa, a high-price version of the traditional green card, would bring in job creators and could be used to reduce the U.S. national deficit. The billionaire former real estate tycoon, who has made the deportation of millions of undocumented migrants a priority for his second term, said the new card would be a route to highly prized U.S. citizenship. He said in February that his administration hoped to sell maybe 1 million of the cards and did not rule out that Russian oligarchs may be eligible. South Korea's Constitutional Court unanimously ruled on Friday to remove impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol from office over his martial law declaration, triggering fresh elections after months of political turmoil. Plus, U.S. says President Donald Trump will not fall into the trap of endless negotiations with Russia over Ukraine. Chikunonso Nwabweze reports.
Acting Court President Moon Jae-bae, while delivering the ruling, said that given the serious negative impact and far-reaching consequences of the respondent's constitutional violations, the court dismissed the respondent, Yoon Suk-yeol, as president. The judges held that Yoon's actions violate the core principles of the rule of law and democratic governance, emphasizing that Yoon, by sending armed soldiers to parliament in a bid to prevent lawmakers from voting down his decree, violated the political neutrality of the armed forces. The court ruled that the respondents' unconstitutional and illegal acts are a betrayal of the people's trust and constitute a serious violation of the law that cannot be tolerated. Hundreds of anti-Yoon protesters joined in an outburst of celebration outside the Constitutional Court in Seoul on Friday as the long-awaited hearing ended with the ex-president's removal from office. Yoon apologized for failing to meet the people's expectations in a brief statement released after the verdict. He is the second South Korean leader to be impeached by the court after Park Geun-hye in 2017. Yoon's removal, which is effective immediately, triggers fresh presidential elections which must be held within 60 days to be announced by the authorities in the coming days. He also faces a separate charge of insurrection, which will go on trial later. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Friday that Donald Trump was not going to fall into the trap of endless negotiations with Russia over Ukraine, adding that it will soon be clear if Moscow was serious about peace. Rubio was in Brussels for talks with NATO allies, most of whom have nervously eyed the U.S. president's outreach to the Kremlin to press for a deal to end the Ukrainian war.
We're not going to continue this forever. So none of it was threatening. I think it was more an explanation of this is our timeline, and at some point, it'll be clear whether you want peace or you don't want peace. And that time is coming. It's pretty short. At the same time, as you now have seen, members of Congress have begun to file bills to increase sanctions. So there is going to be growing pressure from Capitol Hill.
Rubio said Kiev has shown a willingness to enter into a complete ceasefire and create space for negotiation, but Russians and Putin will have to make a decision about whether they are serious for peace or not. Chukwunonso Nwabweze, NTA News.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi held talks with the interim leader of neighboring Bangladesh on Friday, the first of such meetings since a revolution in Dhaka ousted the New Delhi's long-term ally and soured relations. Their meeting took place on the sidelines of a regional summit in Thailand. Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus, 84, took charge of Bangladesh in August 2024 after India's old ally Sheikh Hasina was toppled as prime minister by a student-led uprising and fled to India by helicopter. India was the biggest benefactor of Hasina's government, and her overthrow impacted cross-border relations, culminating in Yunus choosing to make his first state visit last month to China, India's biggest rival. Vikram Misri, the Secretary of India's Foreign Ministry, told reporters that Modi reiterated India's support for a democratic, stable, peaceful, progressive and inclusive Bangladesh. Dhaka has requested that India allow Hasina's extradition to face charges of crimes against humanity for the killing of hundreds of protesters during the unrest that toppled her government. Misri said Modi and Yunus had discussed the extradition order, but there was nothing more to add at present. The economy minister said on Friday that French firms should show patriotism by not giving an advantage to the United States in an escalating trade conflict after President Emmanuel Macron urged companies to suspend American investments in response to Donald Trump's tariffs. Macron on Thursday argued it would send the wrong message if French companies pressed ahead with investments in the United States until further clarifications come from Washington over Trump's so-called Liberation Day tariffs. With Paris insisting that the response needs to come on a European level, Lombard said the EU's retaliation would not necessarily involve tit-for-tat tariffs and could use other tools. Direct French investment in the United States were worth $370 billion in 2023, making it the fifth biggest foreign investor in the country, according to the U.S. Bureau of economic analysis. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appointed Ayo Sotinri as the new managing director of the Bank of Agriculture with immediate effect. In a statement signed by Special Advisor to the President's Information and Strategy before this appointment, he held the position of Group Chief Executive Officer at SAO Group, which was marked by groundbreaking agricultural initiatives, including developing a 20,000-hectare oil palm plantation and large-scale poultry, aquaculture, maize and cassava operations in Ondo State. Sotinri holds an executive MBA from SET Business School, Oxford University, an advanced diploma in environmental conservation, and a master's in engineering business management from Warwick University. Sotinri's appointment aligns with the Tinubu administration's strategy to revitalize Nigeria's agricultural sector, and he is expected to bring a diverse and extensive background in the private and public sectors to his new role. This is the news on NTA International. More reports shortly. Thank you for staying with us on the news on NTA International. The section of Independence Bridge, Ahmadu Bello Way, Victoria Island, where palliative works were ongoing, has been reopened ahead of Monday, 7th April target date. Let's join Lanre Bileye, who is on the field, of course, who was on the field earlier, to give us an update. Lanre, so how is the situation there?
We walked all through the night and we've restored this. If you ask me how did it happen, I will say it's by God's wisdom and grace. You know, how it happened is all God's. But the integrity of the bridge, the integrity of the road we have repaired is 100%. So what we are doing later is for long-term effect. But there is no problem about this repair. So we are going to be doing a more permanent work after 3 weeks, because we don't know the integrity of the piles carrying the abutment, so that we relieve the abutment of any load at all. But the load will rather be a pin load, which we are going to introduce, which will help the piles, so we continue to press it down.
With the bridge now reopened, many Lagos residents are breathing a sigh of relief.
When I was coming, I saw that everything was free, and it has made my work move fast.
I must commend the minister for his speedy work.
Let's turn our attention to court proceedings now. The Federal High Court sitting in Abuja has adjourned the suit filed by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan against the Senate to May 12, 2025 for further hearing. The presiding judge, Justice Binta Nyako, gave the order at the commencement of hearing of the matter in Abuja. Dele Atumbi of our judiciary desk reports.
Parties in this matter are Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan as plaintiff, Clerk of the National Assembly, the Senate, President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, and the Chairman, Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Code of Conduct are all respondents. The substantive matter before the court is the suspension of Senator Natasha by the Senate. At the resumed hearing of the matter afresh due to the recusal of the trial judge, the new trial judge, Justice Binta Nyako, restrained all parties from granting media interviews during the pendency of the case. Justice Binta Nyako issued the order following the complaints by the counsel to the third respondent in the matter that the plaintiff was granting media interviews on the matters that are sub judice. The court equally barred all counsel in the matter from granting media interviews on issues relating to the case currently pending before the court. Before the recusal of the first trial judge on alleged bias, the Senate President has instituted an interlocutory appeal challenging the jurisdiction of the trial court before the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal has adjourned the matter to the 7th of April 2025 for further hearing. Justice Binta Nyako is the second judicial officer to adjudicate over the matter, and the matter is starting afresh. In Abuja, Dele Atumbi, NTA News.
The Supreme Court has set aside the verdict of the Court of Appeal in Abuja, which affirmed Julius Abure as the national chairman of the Labour Party. In a unanimous decision, the 5-member panel of justices of the Apex Court ruled that the Court of Appeal lacked the jurisdiction to affirm Abure's position as LP's national chairman. The court held that the substance of the case centered on party leadership, which falls under internal party affairs, a matter over which courts lack jurisdiction. The Supreme Court effectively nullified the Court of Appeal's earlier decision, reinforcing its stance that leadership disputes within political parties should be resolved internally rather than through judicial intervention. Meanwhile, National Working Committee of the Labour Party says Julius Abure remains its national chairman and that the Supreme Court judgment only directed the party to resolve its issues through internal mechanism. A statement by the National Publicity Secretary of the party, Obiora Ifo, says the Supreme Court categorically cautioned lower courts from interfering into internal issues of political parties as they lack jurisdiction to do so. He called on the media to stop giving wrong interpretations to the court judgment as there was no declaration by the Supreme Court sacking Julius Abure from office. The National Judicial Council has distanced itself from the purported appointment of Justice Theophilus Nnamdi Nzeku, who is number 4 in the hierarchy of judges' seniority in Imo State High Court as the acting chief of the state governor, Hope Uzodimma. In a statement, the NJC acknowledged that the governor of Imo State had earlier written to the council requesting for its approval to appoint Justice Theophilus Nnamdi Nzeku, who is number 4 in the hierarchy of seniority as acting chief judge of the state. The council maintained that the governor gave reasons why, in his own view, the 3 most senior judges were not appointable. In the light of this, the National Judicial Council said the request of the governor was yet to be considered and has not given approval for the appointment of acting chief judge for Imo State. The statement cleared the air that the NJC is not a party to the process of the purported appointment of Justice Theophilus Nnamdi Nzeku as the acting chief judge of Imo State. The position became vacant in view of the NJC's recent disciplinary action taken against the erstwhile chief judge of the state. In other news, the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria has taken a bold step in strengthening the training and regulation of pharmacy technicians and key players in ensuring safe and effective medication use. Uche Ugochukwu reports that this was at a strategic workshop where experts, educators and policymakers chart a new course for the profession, addressing critical gaps and setting new standards.
Pharmacy technicians are the bridge between pharmacists and patients. They work to ensure safe dispensation of medications, managing inventory, and even counseling patients. Do this vital group in the health sector get enough training to meet today's healthcare challenges? That is what the Pharmacy Council of Nigeria is addressing at the workshop with the theme, Advancing the Training and Practice of Pharmacy Technicians in Nigeria, a Regulatory Perspective.
I hereby declare this workshop open.
Here, experts, educators, and policymakers gather to tackle key issues: outdated curricula, inadequate training facilities, and the need for mandatory continuing education.
It is a testament to the Council's pivotal role in shaping a robust and sustainable pharmacy workforce for the nation.
For identifying with us in this course of ensuring that we improve and properly situate the pharmacy profession where it ought to be
These hope to equip pharmacy technicians with world-class skills that will reduce medication errors, improve patient safety, and elevate healthcare delivery.
This interactive forum will extensively address the challenges and provide solutions that will guarantee a more qualitative training.
With Nigeria's growing population and increasing burden of infectious and non-communicable diseases, these reforms are expected to boost outcomes in hospitals, pharmacies, and clinics across Nigeria. Uche Ugochukwu, NTA News.
And that concludes the news on NTA International. Thank you very much for watching. I am Nolin Ebel Ame, and my sign language interpreter has been Taiwo Ozoma. Bye for now.